Hi, everyone. Welcome to A Case of the Jills. I have one of my favorite people on today. We have Kirsten Screen with us. She is a registered dietitian and all-around amazing woman who is going to tell us so many good things. Please get out paper and a pencil or a pen because you are really going to want to write some of this stuff down. She is so well-informed and just such a professional. So I'm really thrilled to have her with us today. Welcome, Kirsten.
I'm always so excited to talk to you because if I'm ever like in a bad mood or have a down day, all I need to do is talk to you because you like hype me up. Like it's a little bit of pressure. Like you hype me up and I'm like, I gotta okay, let me loosen up. I gotta show up for this. But also it's so sweet to talk to you all the time because you're just kind all the time.
Thank you. I want to be clear to everyone. I've been around for many years. Everybody knows this is coming up my sixth year doing this. And I've heard so much information coming from so many different places, and it is just, I hype you up because you are really a breath of fresh air and also just so good at cutting through the crap that we are all inundated with all the time. And I just find your message so important, and the way you are able to categorize and conceptualize everything is so easy. So everyone's going to see that right now. So
awesome. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Because I think that your training and your professionalism is really what sets you apart. I would love for you to tell us how you started. Tell us about your training so that we understand what the difference is between a real industry professional and someone who may have less training.
Someone who may have less training. Yes. So it's a little bit of a story, and the listeners will appreciate this because I come from a running background, right? So I actually started with the full intention of becoming a pediatric surgeon. That's what I wanted to do. That's I know, right? From, 9 years on, I wanted 9 years old. I wanted to be a pediatric surgeon. And then I was a high school track runner, and I had a coach who probably had good intentions. I want to give him credit. He probably had good intentions. The goal was to make us all faster and better athletes and all these beautiful things that we all, strive to do. His approach, however, was to tell us all that we're fat, we're lazy, and everybody just needs to get smaller. If we just got smaller, we would all just be better. So here you had, a group of 14, 15, 16-year-old high school females who are going through this massive growth spurt. We're in the middle of puberty. We're all about to put on 40, 50 pounds. And the messaging was get smaller, because you will be better, better, better. And you and I both know that that's not what happened. And that isn't what happened. I tore a muscle of my calf. I had chronic, pains and aches, and my running sucked. I couldn't perform. I was constantly fatigued. I couldn't produce any output whatsoever. And I hated running. I hated it. Literally quit the team, quit everything. Didn't run for, 10 years until I met my husband. Just didn't run because I said, running's the worst. Running sucks and you have to sacrifice everything and it's awful. So it sort of started me down this path of, it doesn't seem right, all the stuff that I'm hearing. The things that he's telling me don't seem like the things that, would get me to those results. So I said, there's got to be a better way. And I went to the library. You and I have had this, I've told you the story. I went to the library and I literally found a book at the library, old school, because you and I are from the pre-Google world.
We are wise. We have our wisdom years.
We have our wisdom years, and I know how to use a card catalog, which is a skill that not everyone has anymore, right? Total side note, can you hear my dog? Because if you can hear my dog, I'll kick him out. If you can't hear him, he's good.
No, okay, and good. He's lovely, by the way. So
he's very sweet, but he's chewing on his bone right now. I can see it, but I can't hear it. So I want to make sure you can't hear it. That's why we have AirPods, right? So anyway, I went to the library and I happened to stumble across this book by a registered dietitian who is sort of, in my world, the pioneer of sports nutrition. Her name is Nancy Clark. And I stumbled across her book and I took it home and I devoured this book. And then I told my parents that I wanted to be a registered dietitian. And they lost their minds because I was going to be a pediatric surgeon, right? They understood what that meant. Nobody knew what a dietitian was. What's a dietitian? What does a dietitian do? Nobody knew. But I persisted because that's what I do. If you know anything about me, if I decide I'm going to do something, we're going to go ahead and do that. So I went to school and I went to the University of Florida and I took an intro to nutrition class, and the rest is history. In order to be a registered dietitian, It's not something you enter into lightly because it is a 7-year path to get there. It's a very long 6 to 7 years, depending on, kind of the nuances of your degree. But we're all required to have an undergraduate degree in nutrition or a related science. Mine is in human nutrition, specialty in dietetics. Dietetics is the application of human nutrition to our day-to-day. And then by the year 2024, we're all required to have a master's degree. I got my master's degree when I graduated a little bit before 2024, a lot before 2024. So my master's degree is actually in public health. I chose to go public health because it encompasses the health behavior theory part, the human condition behavior part that plays a role in everything we do with food, right? Like it's the science of how does human metabolism work? That's my undergrad. I spent many years studying that. My master's on purpose was geared toward that piece. Dietitians aren't done after that. We have to do a year of supervised practice in a hospital and community setting. So we are supervised by seasoned dietitians. We have to go through every clinical rotation that a physician would have to go through. We learn everything from, the hepatic system to whatever. We do all of our rotations in that setting. We also have to do food service management. So we understand how this functions in the real world and the application of it. We do community nutrition. So that's a year. And then we have to pass a national registration exam. Hardest test I've ever taken in my life. Hopefully I'll never have to take it again, but I passed it on first try. Most people don't. I will actually also say in order to get into that internship we have to do, it's about, I want to say, a 50% acceptance rate. So it's a very limited set of folks that get in on their first, sort of on their first try to do this internship. It's a very sought after situation because it's just really hard to finish after these 6 years of having gone to school. So then you do the internship, you take the exam, you pass the exam, if the stars align, you pass the exam. And then we are held to a professional standard of ethics that we have to repeatedly perform these ethics trainings. We also have to continue with 75 hours of continuing ed every 5 years. We kind of have to revisit our education plan. What's the goal? What's our professional path? And then we have to do continuing education to follow that. The point of all of everything I just told you is it's a really long path to sort of earn your stripes. It's a medical profession. It is a very comprehensive, complex subject. We're talking human metabolism. If you've ever seen the image of human metabolism, it's a lot. I had to memorize it at one point. It's very overwhelming. It's a lot. You need somebody who understands what goes into that.
So a little bit of light learning.
Just a little bit. Just a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. I'm really glad that you went through all that because, I think that a lot of athletes, we tend to consume information online. We tend to, pardon the pun, by the way, but we tend to kind of get our information online or from fellow athletes. And sometimes we're led to get ideas about diets or ways of eating that are not necessarily coming from the best sources. And so what you're describing is really, that you've created this very deep well of professional knowledge. And so, to be clear, talking to someone about your sports nutrition, and that person has done a few weekends of training online, or they've done a few months even of training online, there really is quite a big difference between you and that person.
It's comparing a person who might give you a shot at a health clinic to a physician who has studied for 15 years and could truly be your pediatric surgeon. It's a vast discrepancy in training and understanding. The other piece to know about that, registered dietitians are governed by essentially the medical board the same way that physicians are. So we are held to a standard and we're supervised. There are people who are going to look and go, are you doing what you should be doing? Everybody eats, but that does not make folks qualified to A, understand how that actually works internally, or B, and this is the bigger piece, give advice and guidance to others. In most states, it's actually illegal. So when somebody who isn't a registered dietitian gives nutrition advice, individualized nutrition advice, in most states, it's actually against the law. It's not enforced because it's everywhere, right? But it is against the law. So if someone were to want to enforce it, there it is. So you really want to make sure that you get your information from somebody who is credible and capable of interpreting the data, because we are looking at research. It has to be evidence-based. It has to be science-based. We can't, somebody said this to me the other day, and it's a quote I will use forever. She said, the plural of anecdote is not data. It's the best quote ever because that's reality, right? So just because everyone eats and everyone thinks they know what they're doing they may have their own situation figured out and good for them. It does not translate to the next person. And most certainly that person's not capable and qualified to just transmit that information to someone else. It's just not the case.
I love all of that. And I'm so glad that there are people like you, because what you just said really just made me think of something important, which is that you're using data and deep professional knowledge to be able to advise someone on what they're supposed to eat, with the outcome being their health. And in the case of athletes, their ability to perform well.
Yep.
But it seems that in a lot of cases, that is not really the end goal that people are most interested in. It seems, particularly with athletes in sports that value, let's say, a smaller body, a leaner body, because of all the reasons we equate that with being fast or being very good at our sport, that the end goal there is not necessarily health and performance, it's a body type.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think intrinsically we all want to be the people who prioritize health. I think everyone wants to be that person, but we're influenced by so many things. We're influenced by industry standards. We're influenced by what we see. And when I say industry standards, I want to caveat that by, I'm not saying the industry dictates that that's what it is. I'm saying we see things in the industry visually, and that's all we see. And we assume that that visual, and you and I have had this conversation in the past, but we assume that that visual that we see is the reason for the performance. It isn't. It's a backwards thing, right?
Can you go into more detail about how that works in the athlete community?
Yeah. The way I explain it to clients, or when I'm presenting, I always call it the iceberg problem, that we look at something from the top down and we assume that if we just create the outward shell, all the other systems will fall into place and produce what we equate that outward shell with, which as athletes, we equate seeing the very fit, very athletic triathlete of a certain body type, because they usually are very lean, right? You very rarely see an elite who is overweight. So we assume they are an elite because they aren't overweight. The difference is they don't carry extra body fat because they're an elite athlete. It's backwards. We're looking at it from top down, it's bottom up. It's build an efficient body, prioritize your health and metabolism, support every system so it's running at max capacity, support it in recovery, give it adequate rest, give it more than adequate nutrients, and your body will automatically create an efficient engine if all systems are well, right? Like not accounting for external health factors that are out of our control, underlying disease states and things like that. But from an athlete performance perspective, if we create an engine, and I always call it an engine because that's what drives it, if we create an internal system that is functioning as efficiently as it possibly can, the rest is a side effect. Your body will efficiently burn fat. Your body will efficiently build muscle mass. It's not your body becomes efficient because you have forced it into submission and made it smaller and reduced body fat. You have now essentially removed all of the resources your body would need to actually create the system that can sustain that. You're simply looking at making a body smaller. We need to look at making a body better. And the external that you see in the elite happens in that elite because that's their job. Their job is to be as efficient as they can, and they have all the time in the world to dedicate to that. You and I, the average individual that still has a job and responsibilities in life, and not all of these people in their corner to push them to do these things, we may never have that body type. And that also needs to be okay. We need to be okay with, you may do all the working out you can and all the efficient fueling you want to in all the spare time you have. You may never have the same body as the elite because genetically we aren't all built like the elites. And we can put all the effort behind it, but it just may not happen.
So what you're talking about here is differentiating between the goal of attaining a particular body and participating in a sport, which, just on the face of it, seems like two completely different things. In order to enjoy a sport, participate in it, and let it enhance your life, that's kind of over here. Yep. And then your desire to participate in that sport so that you end up with this body, that's kind of over here. And I would imagine that those two customers, as it were, are eating in two very different ways.
Yes.
So tell me, the person who is trying to look like the athlete, how are they eating typically? What is their diet like?
The diet is typically, and I'm going to use a term that drives me absolutely bonkers. It's one of my least favorite terms in the industry that people use. It's clean eating. Clean eating to me is your food hasn't fallen on the floor and you have washed your hands before you cut your vegetables. Like, that's clean eating, right? The whole idea of we only eat certain foods because they have this health stigma, or foods that are superfood, like, there's no food that's a superfood as in it's going to do anything magical in your body. It just is not reality. It's not how it works. To your body, it's carbohydrates, proteins, and fats and micronutrients. That's what it is. Like, that's fundamentally what it is. So the person who's over here on this end eating for an aesthetic, it's eating in order to suppress the body. It's eating in order to control the body aesthetic. It's eating in order to create a physicality outwardly. It's not eating in order to optimize systems. It's not eating in order to optimize performance and output capacity and making yourself stronger and better. It's eating to fit into a certain size pants. It's eating to wear a kit that doesn't show any rolls of body fat. It's eating in order to look a certain way, which almost always, for most of us, involves some type of restrictive behavior, consciously or subconsciously. I want to be clear on that, because I know a lot of people are going to watch this and say, I eat all the things. But do you though? Do you eat all the things to the degree in which your body needs them? Or are you like, yeah, I have a donut sometimes, but then for the next 3 days afterwards, I make sure I eat clean, right? Like, are you actually eating all the things with the goal of, I want to be a better, stronger athlete, human, wife, husband, mother, child, whatever? Or are you eating to, I'm eating just enough so I'm functioning, I can do the sport that, you know, I say I love, but I also really want to stay in a size 2 pant. Where are you prioritizing?
Interesting. Right. Okay. So we're talking about, so the person who's training, who is eating for aesthetics is the person who is probably restricting, most likely.
Yes.
And so the person who instead is trying to be the best person they can be and the best athlete they can be at the same time is eating adequately to support all of their body functions.
Yeah.
And so that leads to this amazing thing that you described to me. One of the first times we talked, you talked to me about efficiency. And so can you dig into a little bit about what an efficient body, you know, without going too far down rabbit holes of science, but just so that people understand, I know you could go way down, but like in general, let's talk about physical and mental kind of outcomes of an efficient body.
Yeah. I'm going to bring it back to, and I just had this conversation with somebody, I'm going to bring it back to hormones and signaling. Your body is constantly telling you how it's doing, constantly. And we either have gotten really good at ignoring it, or we've gotten good at, I pride myself in the fact that my body's always tired, because that must mean I'm working out a lot. Listen, you can work out a lot, your body shouldn't be tired. I mean, obviously there's some fatigue after you ride for 100 miles or whatever, clearly. But if there's depletion, exhaustion, mental fog, like you're snapping at your family, you need a 3 o'clock nap every afternoon, like you're having trouble focusing on the task at work, that's not normal. That means we're pushing the body to a place where the body is not trying to be. And we have signaling and we have issues. And the problem then becomes that we don't support the body with the goal that we're after. We don't create an efficient body. We create a body that we're trying to run into the ground and pride ourselves on the, I can do more with less. Let's do more with more. Because if you do more with more, your body will reward you by becoming more efficient, which is what everyone's after. More efficient as in you have better performance tolerance, you have better workout capacity. Your coach gives you a new training plan and you're like, I can rise to that challenge because I know what to do in order to support the extra need. If your training increases, your intake needs to increase. That's simple math. That's simple math that somehow we have trained ourselves to think, no, I should be able to do more with the same amount. Why? Your car can't go further if it has the same amount of gas for 100 miles. It can't suddenly go 200 miles. Like, how would this be possible for the human body? The reason the human body can do it is because it is a very smart machine and it will take those resources from elsewhere. And it will take those resources from the existing tissues that it has. And we all think that's not a big deal. It's a humongous deal. And I always equate it, especially for the parents, if you have children, you would never knowingly restrict intake from your children, deplete resources from your children, because your children, you know, would have to take it from internal resources, which will leave a gap somewhere. And that gap's going to be a problem. And that gap's not immediately a problem, which is why no one pays attention. But that gap eventually becomes a problem. And the hormone piece that I was talking about, your hormones will start having issues. You will start going into the cycle that I see over and over again, where you see body fat changes. Sure, what you don't see below the surface is hormonal shifts. Your cortisol is through the roof. Your thyroid is suppressed. You're insulin resistant at this point because thyroid and cortisol are all over the place. You're literally functioning on stress hormones. Like I get this often where athletes say in the morning, I'm not hungry in the morning. If you're not hungry in the morning, it's because you're running on cortisol. Normal metabolic function should say, I have fasted for 8 to 10 hours because I was asleep. I immediately need energy. Like I'm now up, I'm doing stuff. I need blood sugar, feed me food. If that's not happening, your hormonal signaling is all over the place. It's usually a result of going after aesthetic instead of going after efficiency. Efficiency means we feed the body according to the output we're asking it to produce. And that is an amount that changes almost daily. And that stresses most people out because people want concrete things.
They want repeatable possibility. They want to be able to repeat the same thing over and over again and get the same outcome. Because it's easier, I think, for people who are not well informed on nutrition. I think we really just want a formula and say 2 of these, 3 of those, this quantity of that, and I should be fine. And I do think that for most people, if weight loss happens, that is considered a plus. Irrespective of what my energy levels are, how good I'm feeling throughout the day, how well I'm able to concentrate, if I'm sleeping through the night, if I'm being a nice person to the people around me, weight loss is considered always a plus. So when an athlete first starts to come and work with you and you're talking to them about fueling properly, you know, the conversation comes up where they're going to say, how much weight am I going to gain? Or am I going to gain weight? Or I can't do this because I'm going to put pounds on and I'm going to be slower, and on and on. So how do you relieve your clients of those assumptions and sort of help to steer them in the right direction? How does that conversation usually go down?
Yeah, and I love that you asked that because that conversation actually usually happens before they become my clients. We have a very sort of strict policy that we don't do weight-based goal setting at all. We don't do weight-based coaching. I currently actually have one client with me who is a power lifter where unfortunately that's part of the sport. We hate it, she and I both. She has to hit a certain weight and we hate it because she knows and she can see now that we have fully fueled her. In order to hit her weight right before competition, she loses power every single time because she's got to cut down these, 4, 5, 6 pounds to this weight and she loses power. So back to this, so it's a conversation I don't enjoy having because I don't like dealing in that realm because it's an unhealthy realm to deal in. But so for my endurance folks, it's just a no-go for me. Like that's just not we will not take you on as a client. We're very particular in how we sort of, qualify our clients because I want to help folks who are ready to truly be helped. If we're still working in the realm of, but I'm attached to the number on the scale, but I'm attached to my pant size, then we're never going to achieve let's see what your body can do if we just fuel the crap out of it. Like if we just do that and fuel it the best that we can, let's see what you can do. And usually the result is what they can do is PRs and, and all of these things that they're after that aren't happening before. So that's the first part of the conversation, which doesn't mean we don't sometimes run up against that in coaching. What we continuously remind folks about, and we do this with our clients, we measure all of these other things that are indicators of how well you're doing. We measure sleep. We measure, it's subjective. Obviously, we have folks, kind of report back on like, how was it this week? But we look at sleep, we look at mood, we look at energy, we look at sex drive. That's a big one that no one wants to talk about because it's personal or uncomfortable, but sex drive is a great indicator of whether your hormones are getting what they need, because that's one of the first things your body will shut down if it doesn't have adequate resources. It's an unnecessary, right? We look at hair, skin, nails. We look at all of these other things that tell us how you're functioning as a human. And here's what I tell to people all the time. We cannot control the scale. The scale is a measure of your relationship to gravity. And the second you eat something, drink something, go pee, go have a good bowel movement, the scale has changed, right? Like you go for a run and people are super excited. I lost 3 pounds on that run. That's awful because you didn't lose 3 pounds of fat. You were underhydrated by about 3 pounds worth of liquid. And that is terrifying, right? This is not good stuff. So we constantly bring it back in the perspective of let's talk about what's actually happening in your body. And also, who cares what your body weighs? I understand everybody wants to have a certain physical, like you're an athlete, you put all this energy into it, you want to look like an athlete. You will with time. If all systems are aligned and you finally learn how to fuel for the output that your body needs, which again changes every single day, systems will align to wherever your body's supposed to fall in that. Does that mean everyone's going to be a size 2? No. Does it mean everyone's going to be a size 20? Also, no. That's the hard pill for people to swallow, but that's the reality of it. Your body will do what the body is meant to do and knows to do if you consistently support all the systems and give it what it needs.
I love that you say this, and I never get sick of hearing it, because one of the side effects of underfueling that I get when I speak to athletes, when I mentor athletes that are, either going through hypothalamic amenorrhea or going through overtraining syndrome, one of the top things that people really get stressed out over is when their body tends to kind of swell up and retain water, right? Yeah. And they're saying, I don't understand. My diet is so clean. I'm not overeating. Why am I retaining all this water? I'm fluffy. I'm so this. And it's very difficult to have the conversation with people about what they have to do, what is happening in their body metabolically that is making that happen. And then you have to have that conversation about stress hormones, and then what they need to do to overcome that. And that seems impossible to them. Can you give us a few words of declarative wisdom? Because if they don't listen to me, maybe they'll listen to you. What needs to happen when your body is so stressed out from overtraining, underfueling, you are pushing yourself to the maximum, and you feel as though you either cannot lose weight or that you have somehow gained weight, you feel yourself bloated, you're just really retaining water? Please tell the children what it is that they need to do in those cases.
Yes, and this is the hardest thing to hear for any endurance athlete. You got to stop moving. You got to sit down. You got to slow down, and you got to eat more. And it's like, and this is going to sound very woo and philosophical, but you have to lean into that process. This is your body screaming at you in the loudest voice that it knows how to scream at you, because we're so disconnected, right? Our brains are so disconnected from our bodies. And why? Our body tells us every day what it needs, every day, very clearly. And I'm a first thing in the morning runner. There are days when my body says to me in the morning, not today. And I still go through that mental thing of, but I want to. But my body so clearly screams at me that today's not the day for you to go run 6 miles right now at 4 a.m. And I have to make the concession, and I have to say, okay, today's not that day. I'll go move in another way. I'll go do some yoga, or I'll go walk for a minute, or like I still, satisfy the mental need for I need to move my body, because we all feel better that way. But the hardest thing for my athletes to swallow, the hardest pill for them to swallow at the beginning, is that if you are in this hyper stress response, your body is literally doing the opposite of everything you want it to do. You can't keep doing the same thing and expect it to get better. You have to literally do the opposite of what you've been doing. That means way less running, way less cycling, way less swimming, whatever you're doing. It means a whole lot more gentle movement. It means a whole lot more food. And the reason you're swelling up, and the reason you're retaining water, and the reason that your body is, freaking out, because there's not enough. Your body's trying to put itself back together, because every single time you have a workout, every single time you have any type of workout, it's a stressor to the body. It's an insult to the body in a good way. It makes you stronger, but it only makes you stronger if you do the second part of that. And nobody does the second part of it. The second part is recovery, refuel, and rest. Nobody does that part. Everyone's like, if I just keep working out more and more on top, then it must be better. No, it's only good if you do a good solid workout that is nutritionally supported before, during, and after that workout. And then you have a period of rest and recovery and an adequate amount of sleep. And if you're running on stress hormones, you never have the adequate amount of sleep, even if you're sleeping 10 hours a night, because you're running on stress hormones. Your body can't settle. You're never rested. You're never relaxed. You're constantly in a state of inflammation and stress. And you mentioned the bloating and it's inflammation. It's every system internally freaking out, but all we're paying attention to is, what does it look like on the outside? It will shift every day. Like we all know, if you get the flu, or, let's not mention what's currently out in the world, but if you get an illness that's, we all know you're going to look and feel like crap for several days while you have this illness. And we understand that this is for several days while we have this illness, and then it's back to normal. It's the same thing with this. You may feel swollen and you may not look the way you want to for a short period of time as your body gets back to normal, if you allow it the time, the rest, the recovery, the fuel to get back to normal. But if you never give it that, you'll always be in that state and you'll always be frustrated.
Right. And, my people who watch this channel have heard me say many times before, the incredible amounts of swelling that I experienced going through overtraining syndrome before I really knew what was happening was not only just really infuriating, but it was also extremely painful.
Yeah.
So if there's those of you out there watching this who come off your run and your feet are so swollen, your ankles are so swollen, your thighs, your hips, everything swells up where you kind of feel like somebody wrapped you in, a Ziploc bags, it's awful. And that is your body, as we just said, that's your body trying to tell you something. Be that as it may, we have a lot of people in our community that will go through different stages in their relationship with food and sport. And those people will find ways to justify eating balanced with increased amounts of training. There are people who will, let's say, be in a restrictive mindset with regard to food, and then use their training for a particular endurance sport as sort of permission to eat more. And I really just don't want to dance around it. There's a lot of eating disorders that are still hiding in endurance sport under the guise of, well, now I'm recovered because now I eat food. Meanwhile, there's people who are only eating food if they've done a 20-mile run first. There are other folks who struggle with binge eating who will say that they've recovered from binge eating or feel that they've recovered, but then will again do that 20-mile run or that 50-mile race or that half Ironman in order to justify.
To plan for a binge.
Exactly, to plan for a binge. And we see this so often. Very few people are talking about this. And I'm just wondering from the dietetics perspective, from your perspective, if and when you see these types of athletes, how do you begin to uncouple this kind of transactional relationship that they have between food and exercise with healthier mindsets or behaviors where it comes to food? Do you ever have to have hard conversations with people like, hey, you're not recovered, let's talk about this? What does that look like?
Often, actually, I have to have those conversations. And it's unfortunate because because they believe so strongly that they're past their disorder, right? And you want them to be, you're rooting for them. You want them to truly be in a place where it's like, yes, let's just love this sport and let's run the 20 miles for the love of the 20 miles. But then you start to see the cracks in the foundation of like, or the facade, I should say, that it's not for the love of the sport. It's you're learning to love a sport because the sport gives you a transactional return for justifying the disordered eating or the still full-blown eating disorder. So my first thing when we do encounter that, my first step is always, we need to involve a therapist, because we know eating disorders and disordered eating are mental health concerns. We need to involve a therapist. It goes beyond just the fueling piece. It's very important, but it goes beyond that fueling piece. So the mental piece of it, I won't deal with it unless we involve a therapist. That's my requirement to my clients. If we find that this is still what's happening, we need therapy. And I do have to have those conversations with clients, and they're not always comfortable, but my job as their dietitian, as their coach, as their mentor in this is not to validate. No, like we don't need a coach to validate us because we're really good at doing that ourselves, right? We're really good at excusing things for ourselves and talking ourselves through things. We need someone who's going to hold our feet to the fire and say, this is not what's best for you. What's best for you will be this. We need to get you to this. Here's how we do that. From a food perspective, I constantly bring it back. And I had this conversation with a client yesterday, or a prospective client yesterday, who asked if I could just tell her how many calories she needed to eat. And I said, I could, like in theory, I could sit down and do some math. And I will be wrong probably every time, not because I'm not good at calculating stuff. Totally am. We have a bunch of formulas to predict stuff, and I can tell you exactly within a range where you're expected to fall. Here's what that doesn't do. And this is why all the things you find online and all these calculators, like you cannot just take them at face value, because that calculator doesn't know your history, your restrictive behavior, your cortisol levels, your other hormonal disturbances, what you did today versus what you're going to do tomorrow, how much you already restricted last week, or that binge that you're going to have next Tuesday. The calculator doesn't know all of that. So instead, what we teach our clients, and this is vital, vital, vital for me, we teach for you to understand, here's what I asked my body to produce today. As a result, it needs this. If I'm having these, and these symptoms and tweaks and things afterwards, I miss the boat, which means next time, because I get a new opportunity about every 3 to 4 hours. That's the beautiful thing about nutrition. You get to try again about every 3 to 4 hours. Next time I need to make an adjustment. So it's a very baby step process, because it's a very emotionally challenging process for folks who have this history, but we just don't let up. We just practice and practice and practice. And like, let's identify what happened as a result of you eating this way after this run. Let's look beyond, oh, but my run, no. How did you feel? How did you sleep? What was your mood? Who did you yell at today? How much work did you get done? When did the headaches start that you keep telling me that you're getting, right? Like, how were your feet after this? Did you have hip pain after this? We keep tying it back to what's happening physically, because your body is beyond the external shell. Your body is this amazing, intricate, gigantic chemistry experiment at all times. And if stuff is off, it will tell you. We just have to get really good at reading it. So we just always tie it back to that. And with time, we usually get there, but it does take time.
What are some of the red flags of tying ourselves too tightly to either permissive eating or that transactional eating? What are some of those red flags that might tell us that we're not quite recovered from known eating disorders, or that we might be sort of circling around some disordered eating patterns?
You mean physical red flags, or you mean sort of
physical.
psychological? Yeah, physical red flags. A lot of things I see physical is like some of the stuff that you mentioned earlier, right? Like you have crazy water fluctuations during runs, like you're super swollen or you're, barely sweating. Like we have those kind of issues. I see a lot of mineral imbalances with folks where it's like headaches, cramping, and everyone's like, oh, I needed to take more sodium. But well, if you're always cramping, if we have restless leg syndrome at home at night, like we have these kind of things, that's problematic. I see a lot of like suppressed thyroid function, which is not something that people immediately can tell. Do you know what I'm saying? Like folks who have true thyroid disorders, they have, like, you see it, right? Like you gain weight and hair comes down, all that. But folks who are kind of on that cusp where we're not quite hitting the mark and there's some restrictive stuff going on, we'll start seeing dry skin, or you start seeing digestive upset, or you start seeing fatigue when there shouldn't be fatigue. You start seeing like the eyebrows are getting thinner. You start seeing like, well, I'm shedding more, I must be really stressed, right? You start seeing these little things that we're really good at explaining away. We're like, well, it's just that, well, I was stressed last week. It was a bad week at work or whatever. And we keep explaining away one little thing after the other. But if you were to take a 30,000 foot view and look at the whole picture, you're like, there's a lot of little spikes that we have just accepted as normal, right? And like, you don't have to lose your period before it's a problem. That's the final, like losing your period is like I have given up, I throw in the towel, the body's like, I'm done, like I'm so done, and you didn't listen to all the other things. It's like the final thing that happens. But there's all these things beforehand that we just ignore because we're focused on but I'm still small and I ran 20 miles.
And also for men as well that are kind of in this same position, the outward signs might be slightly different. Obviously, there's no period to lose, but we talk about all the time things like, as you mentioned, libido issues, erectile dysfunction. Also, men, right? Irritability. What are some of the other sort of male-specific things that you might find it's that they're underfueling and maybe having a hard time eating unless there is an excuse to eat or that permission to eat?
Yeah. And I don't know that these are so much more male specific, but I think these are the ones that men might pay more attention to. Like if you're suddenly listless, you're not wanting to go hang out with your buddies. You don't want to do stuff with your kids. Like your wife annoys you all the time more than spouses annoy each other normally, right? You find yourself depressed. You find yourself anxious. Depression and anxiousness are a big one for me because that's usually we're underfueled, we're undernourished, the gut microbiome is way off and something is just not right. It's those kind of symptoms, like whatever your normal before was, if you can remember what that was, and suddenly psychologically, emotionally, physically, you don't feel that way, pay attention. Also for men, if you start losing muscle mass and you're not doing anything differently than you were, but you're suddenly losing muscle mass, you don't have resources to maintain your muscle mass. That's what your body's doing. Your body is using stored energy in the form of muscle and fat and everything else to produce the power for the work that you're doing. So I think for men, those would be the big ones. From a male versus female perspective, obviously the lost period for females. For men, a big one is like a lack of erections in the morning, normal things that would happen with normal physiology. If that's a constant and you're noticing this more and more, especially if you're younger, like pre-age 50, that's not normal. Like your body's lacking something in order to have normal function.
Right. Okay. Some quick questions about
Mhm.
just yes or no. So is there ever any occasion where an athlete should eat a low carbohydrate diet?
In my opinion, no.
Okay. And
Sorry, I'm going to give a caveat. If someone is an epileptic, there's some research that supports that, but I would still argue we have to supersede the fact that you're asking your body to produce a bunch of output. So we still have to match carbohydrate to the output that you're asking it to produce.
okay, perfect. Next question, is sugar poison?
No, my goodness, sugar is literally the preferred fuel of your body. Your body will take everything you eat and convert it into some type of sugar. It's what we function on. It is not. Also, sugar
So,
addiction is not a thing.
so table sugar versus, let's say, some dates, is there any preference there? One is better than the other?
Here's what I always say to folks. Meals are where you worry about food quality. Workouts are where you worry about quantity of the specific nutrient that you need. Your body will look at table sugar versus a date and it gets glucose. The end. That's it. Your body metabolically, physically can't tell the difference. Obviously, for nutrient resources, we need to vary our diet and we need a variety of things. But when you're fueling a workout, sugar is sugar is sugar. I don't care where you get it.
Do you guys see why I love her? Do you see this? Okay. All right. So, vegan diets, yes or no?
Um, I'm not going to say I'm anti-vegan because I know there's a lot of people who just really harp on being vegan. I will tell you as an athlete, it is very hard to meet all of your needs as a vegan, and you're going to have to pay a whole lot of attention. And if you're not working with a dietitian, I beg of you, please go find a dietitian who knows what they're doing with athletes and veganism, because it is a different ballgame.
Okay. Next question is about stomach upset. Do you believe in elimination diets? Do you believe in cutting out certain foods or food groups? What is your go-to when someone comes and says that they're having, digestion issues, gas, maybe some bowel stuff? What is your advice there?
My go-to immediately, we do stool testing. We don't eliminate anything unless we have answers, because otherwise we're guessing, and otherwise you're removing nutrients that your body vitally needs. So no, we don't randomly eliminate, because also most people have no idea how to do an elimination diet, because we go to school to figure out how to do an elimination diet and make sure we reintroduce. Side note on that, elimination diets are always, always, always temporary. And we reintroduce or replace if we must permanently replace something because you have a true allergy. But people confuse allergy, intolerance, and sensitivities greatly. That's a whole other conversation that we don't have time for here. But step one, get a stool test from a qualified provider who specializes in that. We do what I call integrative performance nutrition. We make sure we look at the whole system. We play nutrition detective and figure out what's going on. There's almost always a reason. IBS, also side note, IBS is the term for a collection of symptoms. It's not the cause. There's a cause that's causing that. It's usually a microbiome issue. It might even be a pathogen. I see tons of them all the time. It could be lack of vital bacteria. It could be too much bacteria you don't need. It could be lack of stomach acid. It could be a million different things. Maybe not million, but you get what I'm saying. Test. Don't just figure it out on your own. Test, get help, dig deeper.
Okay, and the last of my quick fires is on supplements. Protein powders, yay or nay? What is your relationship to either protein powders or bars, meal supplement bars, all this kind of frankenfood? What is your thought on that?
Frankenfood. Eat food first. If you learn to properly eat, and most of us don't know how to do that on our own. I'm sorry, but most of us don't know how to do that on our own. We did when we were 2. And then we had caretakers and parents and whatever who messed us up, and they didn't mean to, but they did. And now here we are as adults, we don't know what we're doing. So learn to eat food first. Supplements are exactly that. They are to supplement gaps that we can't fill elsewhere, but they should also, in my opinion, be temporary. You need to be able to fill those gaps with proper diet. And once you learn how to do that, you don't have any gaps. If your system is intact, and we have done that work and make sure your gut is healthy and it can absorb and utilize the food that you need, and you're eating the right foods, there are no needs for supplements. Are there some supplements that help with performance improvements? For sure. And we can strategically pepper those in when we need to. But if you're relying on a supplement to meet your needs, then you're doing a poor job of meeting your needs.
I love that. Okay. And before we wrap up entirely, I really just want to give you a few minutes to talk about some of the junk and bunk we see out there. It seems like I keep thinking that we're going to get to a point where we have saturated our ears and our eyes with junk diet information.
Yeah.
And you and I have been through low fat in the 80s, no carb, low carb, Atkins, South Beach diet. We have been through all of it. Now it's keto, now it's paleo, now it's all these things. And aside from that, everybody with a mouth feels as though that they are a guru in diet. Anyone who like gets in a bikini thinks that they have the right to tell everyone, you know, what to do to wear that bikini. I'm totally sick of it. And I know that everyone watching this is sick of it too. Please give us your highlight of junk and bunk and stuff that makes you want to tear your hair out. Please tell us.
How much time we have? We have another hour, right? So the first one, and this is sort of an all-encompassing, but I'll walk you through it. The first one to me is, whenever you hear something where someone tells you this is the solution for everybody, it's garbage. There is no solution for everybody. We are 8 billion individuals on this planet. Every single one of us could do exactly the same thing and it wouldn't work for 7.99 billion of us, right? Like, if it tells you it's a solution that applies to everybody, it's garbage. Anything that tells you it's going to change your life in 30 days is garbage. Anything that tells you as an athlete to not consume carbohydrates is sheer and utter garbage. And whoever told you it does not understand normal human metabolism. Your body runs on carbohydrates. The work you're doing is carbohydrates. Even once you start burning fat, majority of what you're burning is still carbohydrates. In order to burn fat, you metabolically require carbohydrates in the Krebs cycle to burn the fat. Like, it just makes zero sense scientifically. The problem with all these things is nobody cares about the science. Everyone's like, but Susie over here is in this little skimpy bikini, and look at her, and she's taking, apple cider vinegar gummies. So I should too. Listen,
she's getting hot. She's getting hot.
I'm worried about to have to take turtleneck off over here. Listen, the keto is garbage. Whole30 is garbage. If it's no carbohydrates, it's garbage. Fasted training is the thing that drives me the craziest, because you're immediately asking your body to function without a resource. Why? When you could just give it the resource. If you're training fasted, you're restricting. And you can tell me all day long that you're not restricting. You're training restricted. That's what you're doing. Why are you restricted? Is it because your goal is aesthetics and you're just not saying that out loud? Is it because I want to burn more fat? Why? Because you want to be a more efficient runner who utilizes fat more efficiently as a resource? Or because you think if you burn more fat, you'll be smaller? Stop training fasted. It's nonsense. Fuel your workout. I don't care that you're getting up at 4 o'clock. No one can tell me that you cannot eat before an early morning workout. I have 3 children. I have a full-time job. I'm a spouse. I have a house. I have a dog I take care of. I work out at 4 a.m. I eat before every single workout. It doesn't have to be complicated. If you're making it complicated, it's because you don't know what you're doing. It doesn't have to be complicated. So biggest peeve is anything related to removing carbohydrates, removing food groups, or listening to anybody who is simply a person who does stuff and as a result thinks that person is qualified or allowed to tell others how to do stuff. No, find a professional.
My favorite that on your social media lately, and by the way, please go follow Kirsten. She's amazing. Like her social media game is on point. And I have a lot to learn from her. But my favorite quote from her lately is, "Stop doing stupid shit."
Weird shit. Stop doing weird shit. That's literally, and I'm going to make it a hashtag. It's going to be hashtag stop doing weird shit, because it does, like, it's food, you guys. Like, we are fundamentally biologically programmed to eat food, sleep, have sex. That's literally it. Like, that's what we're biologically programmed to do. If we can't eat food normally, like, what is there? Do you know what I mean? Like, it is the bottom of the hierarchy of things that we need. If you look at other countries, you look at less industrialized countries where everyone's not looking at aesthetic, you know what they all want? They want food. It's what they all want. We have all of this food and we have all the knowledge and all the resources to use it and assemble it in the most beautiful way to make ourselves, our bodies, our sport, everything better. Let's do that. Let's stop doing weird shit and do that. I didn't know if I could cuss on your show, so I didn't. But you gave me permission just now, so we're doing that.
It's perfect. Thank you. This is such an incredible conversation. This is our first official one, because we've talked several times offline, but it certainly will not be our last. If people want to connect with you, where can they do that? Where's the best place to grab you, aside from your amazing Instagram?
The easiest is Instagram. You're welcome to DM me on Instagram, and just make sure you spell dietitian correctly, because it's a T-I-T, not a C. There's no C in dietitian. Anyway, Your Fitness Dietitian on Instagram. The website is the same, yourfitnessdietitian.com. They can also email me, which would just be hello@yourfitnessdietitian. I'm happy to interact. I'm happy to, connect and hear what you have, what you're worried about and what you're concerned about, and just send me a message. Let's just reach out.
Awesome. And you can learn a lot just by following her again on social media, because she talks about a lot of really key points. If any of them resonate with you, chances are it would be good for you to speak to a registered dietitian. Also, last thing, just to make sure, there's a registry of dietitians
Yes.
in the United States. Where can people access that so they can try to see someone local?
Yeah, if they want to see someone in person, we see all of our clients virtuals, and a lot of dietitians do that. But if you need to find somebody local to you, the easiest place to go to is eatright.org, which is the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. It's sort of our professional governing body. And if you click, I think it's on the top right of the website, there's a little link that says find an expert. And you will find a registered dietitian. You just put in your zip code, you'll find somebody that's local to you. But again, many dietitians do what I do, which is virtual. What you want to do, whoever you're looking for, we specialize in many different things. All of us specialize in different things within the realm of nutrition because it's a large field. So find somebody for what you need. If you're having cardiac concerns, find a cardiac dietitian. If you're, a cancer patient, find an oncology dietitian. Find who you need, who specializes in your realm, because you want someone who's well-versed in what you actually need.
Right. And highlight on find an expert, an expert here. This is someone who has gone through all the training that Kirsten has and can really be a good help to you.
Yep.
Again, thank you so much for doing this today.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
I enjoyed it.
Thank you everyone for watching, and we will see you again soon.